I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it, no big deal, just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of college after the first six months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why did I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed college graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college, but I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford, and all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and began dropping in on the ones that looked interesting. It wasn't romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposit to buy food with, and I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take no more classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about bounding the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life, but 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. When we designed it all into the Mac, it was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on this calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to, when I was in college, you have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever, because believing that the dots will somehow connect in your future will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the wrong path, and that will make all the difference. My second story is about love and loss. I was lucky. I found what I love to do early in life. Wasn't a started after my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just a sofa in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30, and then I got fired. How can you get fired from a company you started? Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well, but then our visions of the future began to diverge. And eventually we had a falling out. When we did our work, the director sided with him, and so at 30 I was out, and very publicly out. What had been the focus of my entire other life was gone, and it was devastating. I really didn't know what to do for a few months. I felt that I let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that I dropped the baton as it was being passed to me. I met with David Packard and Bob Mills trying to apologize for screwing up so badly. I was very public failure and I've been thought about running away from the party. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still love what I did. The thought of events at Apple had not changed them one bit. I've been rejected though, but I was still in love what I did. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting far from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The happiness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It filled me to end on one of the most creative periods of my life. During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Fixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who became my wife. Pixar wanted to create the world's first computer animated feature film Toy Story and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. In a remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next, and I returned to Apple, and the technology we developed next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And Rorin and I have a wonderful family together. I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I had been far from Apple. It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Sometimes life's gonna hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I love what I did. You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for your work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking. Don't settle. My third story is about death. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations or pride or fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There's no reason not to follow your heart. Everything else is secondary. When I was about a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. My doctor advised me to go home and get my... The doctor told me that this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable and that I should expect to live no longer than 36 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try to tell your kids everything. You thought you have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes. I lived with the diagnosis all day. Later that evening, I had a biopsy where they stuck an endoscope down my throat, threw my stomach into my intestines, put a needle into my pancreas and got a few cells from the tumor. I was sedated, but my wife, who was there, told me that when they viewed the cells under a microscope, the doctors told me this was the doctor started crying because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is incurable and that is curable. Doctor started crying because it turned out to be a very rare form of pancreatic cancer that is curable with surgery. I had the surgery and thankfully I'm fine now. This was the closest I've been to facing death, and I hope it's the closest I get for a few more decades. Having lived through it, now I can say this to you with a bit more certainty when death was a useful but pure intellectual concept. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet, that's this destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best measure of life. It's a life change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you, but someday not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. When I was young, there was an amazing publication called the Whole Earth Catalog, which was one of the Bibles of my generation. It was created by a fellow named Stuart Brand, not far from here in Merrill Park, and he brought it to life with his poetic touch. This was in the late 60s before personal computers and desktop publishing. This was late 60s before personal computers and desktop publishing, so it was all made with typewriters, scissors, and Polaroid cameras. It was sort of like Google in paperback form 35 years before Google came along. It was idealistic, overflowing with neat tools and great notions. Stuart and his team put out several issues of the Whole Earth Catalog, and then when it had run its course, they put out a final issue. It was mid-1970s and I was your age. On the back cover of their final issue was a photograph of an early morning country road, the kind you might find yourself hitchhiking on if you were so adventurous. Beneath it were the words, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." It was their farewell message as they signed off. Stay hungry, stay foolish. And I have always wished that for myself. And now, as you graduate to begin anew, I wish that for you. Stay hungry, stay foolish. Thank you all very much. 한 93% 된 것 같네요. 거의 다 외웠고 조금 헷갈리는 부분이 있었는데 그 부분을 체크하면서 할 걸 그랬나? 제 생각에는 Everything Else is Secondary가 2번 들어갔던 것 같은데 어쨌거나 지금 상황은 그렇습니다. 그리고 이제 다음번 외워야 될 대상을 물색해야겠는데요. 유튜브에 찾아보니까 베네딕트 베컴비치인가? 영화 배우가 했던 프레젠테이션이 한 6분짜리 있더라고요. 보통 2분 30초로 좀 간략하게 편집되어 올라와 있던데 저는 그냥 통째로 앞뒤 좀 자잘한 부분까지 다 합쳐서 6분짜리를 한번 시도해 보려고 합니다. 다음 목표는 아무래도 연설자가 영화 배우다 보니까 좀 연기적인 측면이 들어가 있더라고요. 음의 높낮이도 스티브잡스가 했던 것보다는 훨씬 높낮이가 많이 들어가 있고 감정적인 요소도 가미가 돼 있고 해서 좀 외우기는 좀 수월할 것 같은데 조금 내용적인 측면에서 부분적으로 제가 와닿지 않는 부분이 있어서 그 부분에 대해서는 어떻게 해야 될지 좀 고민 중이에요. 왜냐면 이거를 수도 없이 반복을 하려면은 제가 마음속으로 우러나서 하고 싶고 재미있고 와닿는 내용이어야 되는데 그 내용에서 조금 제 가치관과 좀 안 맞는 부분이 있다면 좀 그런 반복하는 지루한 과정을 견디기가 쉽지 않아서 내용을 오늘 좀 다시 한번 면밀히 보고 정말 이거를 해도 괜찮을 것인가 결정을 하고 다음 작업에 들어가겠습니다. 이거는 뭐 거의 다 됐으니까 계속 리터칭 하면서 조금씩 수정할 거 수정하면서 계속 반복 숙달할 거고요. 치아 교정 같은 경우에도 치아 교정을 철을 뺐다고 해가지고 끝나는 게 아니잖아요. 계속 유지 장치를 해야 된다고 하더라고요. 저는 뭐 교정을 한 건 아닌데 그렇다고 들어서 계속 교정을 해 나가도록 하겠습니다. 오늘 암기 끝!